Eric Walmsley, Systems Engineer with Nutanix. I'm here today to show you a brief overview of the Prism interface. This is actually version 5.1, so those of you that are familiar with Nutanix, you're going to be in for a treat because it came out in July of 2017, so you may see some new features. We are logged into Prism already. I'm accessing it through Google Chrome. Prism is an HTML5 interface, so that means it runs on any modern browser, any modern device. It doesn't need any special plugins, no Java, no Flash, no installation or anything like that. So again, this is the home screen, and the first column here actually shows you kind of what you have. Okay, so we're running the Nutanix hypervisor in this cluster. That's called AHV. You can see that here up at the top left. We also give you a brief overview. What storage do you have? How much is free? How much is in use? How many virtual machines you have, if they're off, on, paused, etc. And then we even give you a quick hardware summary. So how many nodes do you have? What model are those nodes? That kind of thing. The second column is your performance metrics. What's your IOPS, your bandwidth, your latency. We even give you an overview of your CPU and memory usage so you can keep track of that. On the right half of the screen is your health and alerting. So Nutanix wants to give you a brief overview of, real quick, is there anything wrong in your environment? Is there anything you have to take care of right this moment? So you can actually get a quick glance of that by just looking at this heart symbol. You can see that it's an amber color, so there's a couple warnings out there. Normally you would want that to be a green heart. And you can actually see real quick with the color coding that maybe there's a couple things going on with our hosts, so we should probably check that out a little later. Below that is our data resiliency status. So this lets you know if you can withstand the nodes to tolerate that you've defined for the environment. So this cluster can definitely withstand a node going down, whether that's with an issue or maintenance. The very far right column, this is our critical issues. So Nutanix actually has a feature called Pulse, which is our phone home and alerting system. So if you were to have a critical issue with your environment, whether that's extremely high storage usage, whether you run out of RAM, or a network adapter goes down, a hard drive dies, things like that, it'll send an email to Nutanix and open up an alert, and it'll also email you so that you can also be aware of it. And then with the ticket that's already opened automatically with Nutanix, they'll reach out to you fairly quickly so that you can come to a conclusion of what the issue is and then come to a resolution. So that's the home screen. The next thing I usually like to show is the hardware section because we do offer end-to-end management of your environment with Nutanix Prism. Here in the diagram view, you actually get a graphical representation of what this cluster is actually running. So this is our 1000 series, which is a 2U block, which can have up to 4 nodes per appliance. This one actually only has 3 nodes in it at the moment, but you can see that all these different items are clickable and gives you a good summary of what is the serial number, what's the IP address, the CPU, RAM, memory, disk usage, things like that. We can even click on individual storage devices. This is actually a solid state drive, so you can see what the usage, you can look at the performance metrics, and it really just kind of helps from a troubleshooting perspective. Again, remember, you're able to manage the hardware in the same interface that you're going to be able to manage storage, the virtual networking, the virtual machines, your containers, file services, things like that. So it's really powerful because you don't have to hop in between 15 different screens when you're doing troubleshooting or to figure out what's going on. The other thing that's really nice, and this is unique to Nutanix, is part of our one-click operations, we have the ability to expand your cluster live. So up here on the top right, there's this expand cluster button. If you click that, the cluster actually does a quick network discovery. It goes out and basically it shouts, hey, is there anybody out there? And if someone responds, it gets information about it. So you can actually see there's another node out there that can be added to the cluster. So if you select that node, you can go in and you have the ability to change the IP addresses, set the DNS name, and real quickly we'll just go and kind of show you what it does. It's letting us know that the hypervisor on that version or on that host is not the same as the rest of the cluster. So it's actually saying that if you hit the expand button, it's going to re-image it for you. So that's something else that's unique to Nutanix. We always try to do everything at the cluster level, and we do give you the capability to do things even deeper, but it really makes sense to run the same version of your hypervisor in the same cluster, so we'll image it for you. And that's something that happens automatically. If you were to hit the expand cluster button, it would do that image process, and then once it was done after a couple minutes on the home screen, you would actually see the amount of storage that you have would increase, the amount of RAM and CPU you had would also increase, because that host would be added to the cluster. Something else that's unique to Nutanix is if we go up here to the gear icon and click Upgrade Software, we have a built-in update management. So you can do things like upgrade AOS, which is the Acropolis software. You can even upgrade things like the hypervisor. So we're running our hypervisor, which means we can provide the bits for it. So there you can actually see there's an upgrade available for this hypervisor. So if you wanted, you could hit the upgrade button and it would go through, it would automatically download the software from Nutanix's update servers. It'll upgrade the first host after putting it in maintenance mode and moving all the workloads off of it. Do the install, reboot it, bring it back into the cluster, do a couple checks on it to make sure everything's okay, and then move the workloads back onto it, and then do the same thing through the rest of the cluster. So this means you don't have to babysit it. You don't have to worry about doing file shares. You don't have to SSH into things. You don't have to worry about prereqs or anything like that. We take care of it for you. You can also see a couple other tabs up here, even things like firmware. So for the HBAs, the BIOS, BMC, and the storage devices, you can manage the firmware all here without having to go to another tool. So it's really powerful. It makes it simple to manage your environment, and all of these upgrades are very simple with our one-click process. So I've shown you the hardware. I've shown you real quick how we do software management. Let's go ahead and let's play around with storage. We go to the storage section of our interface. We bring you to the overview page, which just real quick shows you, again, like we saw on the home screen, what's our performance metrics and how much do we have used and free. But it also shows you good things like our data reduction from compression and dedupe if those are enabled, which this environment you can see we're getting a 3.3 to 1 overall savings, and then gives you even more information about, say, like your cache dedupe and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and let's go to the table view, and we'll create what's called a storage container. Now, a storage container, for those of you that aren't familiar with Nutanix, that's literally just your data store. We don't have a concept of like RAID groups, LUNs, volumes, or aggregates or anything like that. You do everything at the storage container level, and most of our customers typically have 1, 2, maybe 3 storage containers because you don't need to do those old LUNs, RAID groups anymore. The way we're architected, it actually makes a lot of sense to simplify your environment and just use a couple of storage containers. So if we go ahead and we'll make our first storage container, I could go ahead and hit save now and it'll automatically mount it into all of our hosts. But I'm going to actually show you the advanced settings and go through them real quick. So the first one is replication factor. So that's how many copies to have for each block of data that you write. The default is 2. We also have the ability to do a replication factor of 3. You can reserve capacity for this storage container. By default, we do thin provision everything because it does make things simple and also auto expands as you add your nodes to your cluster. But if you need to reserve capacity for a specific storage container, you can absolutely do that. You also can set a maximum amount of space that the storage container can consume. So that's what the advertised capacity does. The next thing is compression. So we do support both compression and deduplication. So if you want, you can change any setting at any time, and it's just a checkbox. Okay, so we can enable compression with that checkbox, and you can also go in and you can enable dedupe. We also have another storage efficiency feature called erasure coding, which just gives you a little bit more storage efficiency for colder data. Now if we hit save, it'll go ahead and it'll automatically create that storage container for us. It'll present it to all of the hosts in the cluster. And then also, as you expand your cluster, it'll automatically present that storage container out to those new nodes. So here's our new storage container right here. Obviously, there's no data on it. We haven't put anything on there yet. But we did enable dedupe, right? And just to show you one of our unique differentiators, we can go in at any time and change settings. So if we go back down, and let's say you're a database administrator, he got kind of hot in the head and he said, you know what, I really don't want dedupe enabled for our SQL servers. You go in, that's okay. Uncheck the boxes, hit save. And you'll notice that compression is still enabled while dedupe is not. So that's something that you can do uniquely with Nutanix. You can have both enabled, you can have one or the other, and you can change it at any time. We're doing it here at the storage container level, but Nutanix actually even gives you the ability to go down as deep as individual virtual disks for VMs. So if you had both compression and dedupe enabled for your storage container, but there was just one VM that you didn't want to have dedupe enabled for, instead of making a new storage container, you could just go to that VM and set its vdisks to not have dedupe enabled. Really simple. Okay. Now that we have some storage, let's go ahead and let's make a virtual machine. So we'll go to the VMs tab. Again, the overview just kind of shows you your top users, kind of what's going on in the environment. But we'll go to the table view. From here, on the top right, just hit Create Virtual Machine. And again, you'll kind of figure out we try to do everything as simple as possible. So let's say let's make a new SQL server. Ooh, if I can spell SQL. Yeah, you can give a description if you really want to. You just, like all virtual machines, how many vCPUs does it need, how much RAM, give it a hard drive. We'll select the storage container that we created just a minute ago, and then you tell it how big that storage container needs to be, or sorry, that virtual disk. Okay. And then it's a SQL server, and so some other VMs are probably going to need access to it, so let's give it a network adapter. You can see you can have multiple VLANs defined in your environment. We'll go ahead and let's put it on VLAN 102 and hit add. And that's all the settings we'll do today. That's a pretty normal virtual machine. You hit the save button and the Nutanix software is going to make that virtual machine for you with all of those settings that we just did. And if we go and do a filter, because other people are doing demos at the same time, there's our VM right there. You can tell by the red dot that it's actually powered off. You can do all the normal things inside of Prism that you're probably used to with your existing virtual machine management, but we do take it definitely one step further in a lot of areas. So just real quick and make sure you can see it. You can power it on. You can take snapshots manually. You can migrate it to another host. You can pause it. You can do clones. And of course, we can go in and we can change settings at any time. And of course, my favorite, you can always delete that VM. We also allow you to manage the guest tools. Depending on which hypervisor you're running, that'll allow you to manage that hypervisor's tools, or also, since you're running Nutanix, we also have Nutanix guest tools in GT, which enables some advanced features and gives us a little bit better insights. So that VM's powered on. You can see here that we even have a built-in console capability. And again, remember, it's HTML5, so you see it opens up a new window in Chrome for us. And here we go. Obviously, there's no OS installed. We just made a blank VM, so the system's letting us play 2048 until we figure out how to mount a CD ISO and install Windows on it. So let's actually go to another VM that has an app OS on it and that's been running for a while, so you can kind of see some of the other metrics that you get. My mouse is click happy. Right. So we're selecting a virtual machine that's been live for a while. If you scroll down, it gives you a lot of good information about it. What's the name? What host is it running? IP address, RAM, CPU, storage devices, etc., etc. We have a lot of different tabs that give you the information that you're going to need. So one of those would be obviously the performance metrics, so CPU, memory, IOPS, bandwidth, latency, CPU ready time, which I know this one is definitely something that when I was administrator was kind of the bane of my existence, because it wasn't always easy to find out what the ready time was, or you had to build custom charts. So we try to give you all that right there. The other thing that's really neat is if you go to the virtual disk section for the virtual machine, we actually break down every single vDisk and give you the performance metrics, right? So you can see each of these hard drives, what the usage, the capacity, the read and write IOs, and what the latency is. So it really helps you from a troubleshooting perspective when you get that ticket of that DBA saying, hey, my system's slow. you can come in here and if you know, hey, SQL 8, that's my backup drive, and you go and you look at it and you're like, holy cow, this thing, it's still running, it's the middle of the day. Maybe you need to go back to that DBA and say, hey, you know what, you're running backups right now. Or if we look at like SCSI 0, maybe that's the actual DB drive where all the data is, and you're like, hey boss, it's not doing anything. Are you sure that SQL is actually running? Right. So I like to play jokes. The next thing is look at your network adapters. This one only has one, but it shows you the IPs, your packets, things like that. Snapshots, any related tasks, and then IO metrics. This is actually new with version 5, and it's giving you really, really deep performance metrics. Okay, so what's our average latency from the read and write standpoint over time? You can even see what is the amount of data that we've been reading and writing. So what's that block size, right? So you can see that 100% of the time we've been reading at a 4 to 8K block size. We've been writing at different block sizes, but majority of that 4 to 8K. Okay. You can also see what was the latency average over time, and even better down at the bottom, what was my read source? So how much percentage-wise were my reads serviced by spinning disks, by the RAM cache, or by solid state? And same thing for the writes. I'm lying to you. So what would be the breakdown of random versus sequential? So this is definitely good. You can see that this system is running random and we're still getting some crazy amount of performance metrics. But this really helps you when you talk to the application owners or you're doing troubleshooting. You can see, hey, random versus sequential for reads and writes. It just gives you a lot of good information. So that's making virtual machines. There's really not a lot to it, right? There's only so many ways you can make a VM, and we hope we've kind of shown you the simplest way to do it. Nutanix actually has some built-in features that others don't, or if they do, they're not built in. It's additional licensing, different servers you have to deploy, different whole products. So we actually have built-in snapshotting, backups, and replication into the product. So we have this concept called a protection domain, which is just a way to logically group virtual machines that you want to have the same settings. So let's say I want to protect all my SQL servers. So I'll create a new protection domain called SQL. And then from here, you can select all of the virtual machines that you want to protect. We've made that one, so we can go in and we can add that into our protection domain. You can add multiple VMs if you wanted to. And then the last part is you just create a schedule. So the schedule is when to take snapshots, when to replicate, if any, and where to replicate to. So Nutanix does snapshots, snapshot-based replication, snapshot-based backup, which is pretty much the industry standard these days. So like, for example, let's say for our SQL servers, we wanted to do a snapshot every 4 hours, and we wanted to keep that copy maybe 6 times locally. And then we've got our AWS instance where we might want to replicate it and keep the last 12 or something like that. Okay. Ignore that alert just because we're obviously playing around here. You can see though that you can get really dense. You have a lot of capabilities on when to create your schedules. So over the weekly, do you want to do it on Sunday at 3 o'clock in the morning? You want to do it on the first of the month, or do you just want to do a range of when to do these backups? Okay, so I'm going to uncheck the remote site because I don't want to incur any cost by scheduling anything or replicating it to Amazon. And you can create multiple schedules. So we've got one every 4 hours. You can do another one where you do it once a month, that kind of thing. The sky's the limit. From here, you have a couple options to do restores or other activities. So the first one is, let's just say we got hit by CryptoLocker or some other virus and our SQL server was unfortunately the one that got hit. So what you can do is you can go, oh hey, yeah, this is the protection domain that has my SQL server. So let's go to my snapshots. And obviously we only have one snapshot because we just started and we're telling it to take it every 4 hours. But this time tomorrow we're going to have a lot more. So if we select the snapshot we want and just hit restore. And it's going to go, and say, all right, which VM do you want to restore? Obviously, we only have one. If we had multiple, they'd all be shown here. Let's say we want to restore that one. You can restore it over the original one, or you can restore side by side. So we'll call this one like restore or something like that. And just hit OK. And it'll actually go and it'll restore that entire virtual machine in the state that it was in at the time of that snapshot. And it happens very quickly. The other thing you can do is if you're replicating somewhere else to your remote site, whether that's Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, or to another Nutanix cluster, you could select the remote snapshots and you could restore from that remote location. Okay, so let's go look at our VMs real quick and let's see if that SQL one got restored. All right, so there's our restore right there. If we wanted, we could power it on, do whatever we need to. Obviously, there's nothing on there, so I can't really show you anything, but that's backups and restore. We also have the ability to do file level restores. So if you had a system that was included in a protection domain and was doing backups, we actually have in the Nutanix guest tools a little program called Nutanix SelfService Restore. And what it does is it places an icon on the desktop, which allows you to either allow end users or just administrators to go in and select those snapshots that are part of that protection domain and restore individual files. So you can select a snapshot from last week at Tuesday, 4 p.m., and it mounts it as a removable drive, and you can go in and browse it, copy the files over that you need, and then unmount that drive. Or if you forget, or if a user does it and they forget to unmount it, we automatically unmount that device after 24 hours. Some other cool features that we have is on the network side, we're doing a lot of growth here and development. So this is called network visualization. So what this is on the left side is all your virtual machines, in the middle is your hosts, on the right side is your switch ports. And you can see when I move over them, it's kind of highlighting the paths. So this just lets you know what path does this VM take all the way through, and you can even click on, say, like your switch ports and get performance metrics. So this way you don't have to go to the network team to do troubleshooting when you get that ticket that we all know and love that says it's slow and you don't really know where to start, right? So what kind of transmit, receive, drop packets, things like that. What does it look like? We also color code VLANs. So when the networking team states that they've added VLAN 103, 104, 105, you can come in and you can look and go, hey, well, VLAN 500, that's my blue dot. Yep, that's there. VLAN green. Hey, you know what? You guys don't have that one. Or this other one, 1940. Doesn't look like you have that one defined. And you know what? I've got a couple of VMs that are assigned those. So you can go back to the networking team and say, hey, can you all kind of make sure you did a save when you added those VLANs? So let's do that. It kind of helps you with troubleshooting. We've got some other features that are coming in the future that are going to be really cool on the network tab, so keep your eyes out. One of the other things that's new is we have built-in file services. So from here, you can actually deploy a file server cluster that gets deployed on your Nutanix cluster. And so that takes place of needing Windows DFS systems or just Windows servers, so you don't have to pay additional licensing. And from here, you can go and you can manage your shares. So you can create a new file share. Okay, so we've got SQL backups. Maybe we're going to export those, or just SQL notes, whatever it be. Set a share size, and if you want, you can set up permissions, things like that. I'm not going to do that today, but you just hit save, and then now you can go whack Nutanix / SQL notes, and you have your file share. You don't even have to log into Windows. This also ties into the built-in backup and replication engine that Nutanix has. So all of that is all included, really simplifying your environment. One of the other things we have as well is a self-service portal. And this is also fairly new to Nutanix. The self-service portal, basically it allows you to dole out permissions to end users so that they can operate inside of a sandbox. So what we've done here is I'm logging in as a developer that has been given a couple terabytes of storage, a certain amount of gigahertz for CPU, and maybe a couple hundred gigs of RAM. And then from there, I can only see my VMs that I have permissions to. So I'm still logged into Prism, but I'm that developer. So you can give this to say like your help desk, to development team, maybe the finance or marketing team. For some reason they want to at least have read-only permissions of their servers, so you can give them permissions to do that. But let's say I'm that developer, I need to create a new VM. So this is kind of what the workflow looks like. You can deploy it based on templates that the administrators have given you access to, or the same thing from disk images that admins have given you access to. So we'll say we're going to deploy it from a template. Hey, I love databases, so let's click that DB server that we need. It's already preset with some configuration items, but in the next window it's going to actually let us change any of those settings if we need to. So let's just say, hey, this is SQL 02, because remember that other one we made was SQL 01, right? You can select the project, so if they had different projects, and you can it helps you kind of keep track of what resources are being consumed. You can change any of these settings if you need to, and then just hit save. And then it goes and it kind of does the same thing that we've done before, where it creates the VM for you, does all that. Let's just go ahead and take a look at one of the VMs that's already there. You see that you have all the options that the administrator has given to you. So as a developer, we probably want to give them maybe some full permission so that they can power it off, change settings, open the console, delete it, that kind of thing. But we still give them a little bit of access to performance metrics, CPU usage, kind of what's been going on, so that way they can still kind of get a feel for what their environment looks like. And that's kind of new. Okay. So what we've been doing here is I've shown you the management of a single Nutanix cluster, but Prism also has the ability to manage multiple clusters. So I'm going to actually hop over here onto another cluster through Prism Central. It's still an HTML5 interface, but what it's going to show you is basically everything I just showed you, you can do in multiple clusters at the same time, right? So when our home screen loads here, it's going to show you things like the CPU, memory, storage usage, but it's going to show it from multiple clusters. One of the other things that's nice about Prism is because Nutanix is hypervisor agnostic, we support Hyper-V, ESXi, Zen Server, and of course our own AHV. So you can see that we are actually managing 3 different clusters with 3 different hypervisors, and all that inside the same interface. No need for additional tools. So this is the home screen inside of Prism Central. Again, kind of a big overview: CPU, memory usage, storage usage, even recent tasks. Even shows us, hey, what's going on in our environment. Something might be wrong. We might need to look at it. So you can see the heart there is amber, so we might want to look at it. The other nice thing is we allow you to build custom dashboards. So this is what's called the main dashboard. If I click that, there's all these other ones that people have created. And I can also move these widgets around. So maybe I want CPU usage here, I want my runway here. And we also have the option up here, you can click add widgets, and you can go and you can build a dashboard for the SQL team, for the network team, for the help desk team, and give them permissions to just what you want them to see. So that way you don't have to use, again, a third-party tool to get the information about your environment. It's all here already. One of the last things I really like to show customers that I wish I had years ago is the ability to do built-in capacity planning. So Nutanix, like I mentioned before, has a lot of built-in automation and machine intelligence. So one of those things that we apply that towards is the capacity estimation of your environment. So this is one of our demo clusters. So it's actually heavily used. So you can see here that the system's actually telling us, like, hey buddy, you are out of CPU and RAM, like you need to do something immediately. So one of those things that you can do is we have recommendations where the automation engine goes in and says, hey, what do you need to do? So the first thing it's recommending is you need to add a node. Actually, it's saying you should probably add 4 nodes with this config, and you need to do it real quick. The other thing that's nice is it shows us over-provisioned VMs, right? So systems that maybe have too much CPU, too much RAM, right? So the system has 2 CPUs, it's using 11% of that. Okay, maybe it needs 1. Or this system, even better, has 4 CPUs and it's using less than 1% of that. So let's probably change some things. Same thing with RAM. The other thing it shows you, which doesn't look like there's any, is dead virtual machines. So those would be VMs that haven't been powered on in over a month, and it'll show you the CPU, RAM, and storage usage of that system so that you know, hey, if I delete that, I can save up however much resources it was consuming. So what's nice is because Nutanix owns the whole stack, the CPU, RAM, storage, we keep track of it from the birth of that cluster. So you can kind of see what this cluster has looked like over time. We've definitely done some deletions, but here recently we're starting to build up again. So it's actually showing us today, here's what we look like and what we're going to look like estimated based on the existing or the previous usage. But let's say you're in a meeting and the boss man says to you, hey, we're going to be doing this new project, we're buying this new hospital, we're deploying X number of VDI instances, what are you going to need? And typically, what do you have to do when someone says, what do you need? You go, well, give me a minute, and by minute you mean a couple hours to days, and you got to go and you got to look at your vCenter, you got to look at your storage management, you got to look at all these different things, you got to go talk to the networking team and kind of put together a proposal. But what we do is we actually have the ability to run scenarios. So if we add a workload, you can see we have some pre-built workloads like SQL servers, VDI, Splunk, or you can even select virtual machines and you can build a profile off of existing VMs or a new profile. But I usually like to show VDI. So let's pretend that we're going to roll out some VDI instances. We're going to say it's 1,000 users. Our company is growing like crazy. We got a lot of venture capitalist funding coming in. Our stock is going through the roof. So on the middle of August, we're going to roll out these 1,000 users. So let's say add workload. Let's say we have a target of 6 months of runway. So obviously we already didn't have any CPU or memory runway, but you can see from a storage standpoint, we only have 12 days. So we can't hit that 6 months. So we have a couple options. We can manually add some new nodes, or we could just ask the system to give us recommendations. So if we hit that recommend button, it'll actually say, hey, let's add some of these 3000 series, the number of nodes, when to do it, and even what that configuration can look like. You can go in and you can change that. Like if you're like, you know what, I don't want half a gig of RAM, I want this or that. Or you can manually add your own. The other thing you can do is we have this option to generate a PDF where it creates an executive level summary of this report. So you can go back to the boss and you can say, hey, look, we've currently got this. You're saying we need to add these VDI users. This is what that's going to look like. Our system can't handle it. We're going to need to add these nodes. And so you just give them this report. It just gives you that that backing that you need, and typically you know, but it's kind of hard to show. So that's usually what I like to show on a first demo. Real quick, I know I went over a lot. Your head's probably about to explode. Usually from here, what I like to do is either do another demo where I let you kind of drive and ask questions, or we can even come in and do a boot camp where we'll go through some labs, have you create VMs, do backups, install Windows, play with it and things like that. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Appreciate your time. Hope you all have a great day.